Good afternoon, class. My name is Gabriel and today I'll be refuting a claim made about drowsy driving versus drunk driving, in which my opponent made the claim that drowsy driving is just as dangerous as drunk driving. I'm here today to tell you that that is not correct, and that drunk driving is still more dangerous than drowsy driving. So with further ado, let's begin. I want to first look at the wording used in the claim. My opponent says that drowsy driving is just as dangerous as drunk driving. The definition of the adjective dangerous, according to English Oxford Dictionary, is able or likely to cause harm or injury, or likely to cause adverse consequences. This definition presents the idea that we have a probability of events occurring. In the claim of fact speech, there was evidence that talked both about statistics, but also probability. I'm going to compare my opponent's statistics of drowsy driving to statistics of drunk driving and prove that drunk driving is still more dangerous. In her first supporting claim, my opponent states, drinking impairs your ability to drive. I challenge the reasoning to use this statement as a supporting claim of fact. We see this in her outline as well as in her speech. She shows evidence of how alcohol affects the body, as well as how symptoms of impairment through alcohol can be similar to symptoms of lack of sleep. Although she does well in presenting the similarities between the two, there is not much controversy of that subclaim, as it seems more of a statement of fact rather than a statement of claim. This weakens the main claim because now there is one less supporting claim to use. My opponent's second supporting claim states, drowsy driving is so dangerous because sleep deprivation can have similar effects on the body as drinking alcohol. She uses evidence such as, after 24 hours, impairment is equivalent to a BAC of after 24 hours awake, impairment is equivalent to a BAC of 0.10%, as well as drivers are 1 times more likely to be in an accident after getting less than 2 hours of recommended sleep. That statistic then goes on to say that you are 11.4 times more likely to be in an accident when you lose 4 or more hours of sleep. Now, as I stated earlier, the term dangerous has a meaning that introduces probability. I now challenge that the evidence that tries to prove that driving sleepy is just as dangerous as drunk driving is still worse. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they say that at a BAC of 0.05%, a completely legal amount, your odds of wrecking your car have increased 100% versus someone who hasn't drank at all. At 0.08%, your odds have roughly tripled. This statistic was given by the same source that my opponent used when she talked about getting into an accident while driving sleepy. Although your chances of getting into an accident increase as your lack of sleep rises, the probability is far less likely to occur as compared to drunk driving. Now, I know we are talking about the extremes of drowsy driving and how it can bring your impairment equivalent to a BAC of 0.05% and above. According to Osenico and other sources, after 17 to 19 hours of sleep, performance was equivalent or worse of that to a BAC of 0.05%. To put this into some perspective, drinking 2 to 3 standard drinks, depending on your weight, in under an hour will raise your BAC to plus or minus 0.05%. As in a table shown by attorney STEM on drivinglaws.org, it is highly more likely and much easier to finish 2 to 3 drinks in an hour than compared to staying awake for 17 to 19 hours. A big topic that I want to readdress is that my opponent said that drowsy driving is as dangerous as drunk driving. She used multiple pieces of evidence that present statistics about the amount of people that are injured or killed yearly, how sleepiness affects drivers compared to alcohol, and the likelihood of getting into an accident while driving drowsy. I want to further challenge the statistics that they don't compare equally to drunk driving. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration released data tables of both the number of fatal crashes from drowsy driving and drunk driving in the years of 2015 and 2016. The total number of drivers in 2015 that suffered a fatal car crash was 48,000, or roughly 49,000. And out of that number, 736 people died from fatal car crashes involving drowsy driving. And that's only 1.5% of the total number of fatal crashes. Now in 2016, there was roughly 52,000 fatal car crashes. And of that number, there was 9,855 people that died that were involved in drunk driving with a BAC of 0.0% or above. That's 19% of the total car crashes, or total fatal car crashes. Clearly from the statistics shown, drunk driving kills more people than drowsy driving, and therefore drunk driving is more dangerous. Finally, my opponent's third supporting claim states that not enough attention has surrounded the issue of drowsy drivers, as stated in her outline and in her speech. She stresses that we need some more forms and means of bringing to attention drowsy driving. I challenge this reasoning because actually there's a lot being done recently for drowsy driving through technological advances as well as educational programs. According to Google and Amazon, there are earpiece products and cameras that alert the driver when they are falling asleep or head bobbing. You can buy it for about $300 online. And not only that, but many cars include their own sensors that alert the driver when they're drifting out of their lane, as well as approaching objects. So car manufacturers are definitely doing something to combat drowsy driving, and there's much attention on the subject in today's time. So in conclusion, drowsy driving is not as dangerous as drunk driving. Thank you.
All right, well, you label the claims pretty clearly. You do spend a little bit of time on that first point, which isn't necessary because you're not really going to dispute the risk of drunk driving. You just kind of try and put it in perspective, and that's okay. The notion that there's one less point supporting your position isn't really important. What's important is that this was being used for the basis of the comparison, and that's where your argument really starts. And I thought that you did a pretty good job explaining why the comparison was not legitimate, especially with some of the statistical information that you presented. The probability argument that you get into, I think, makes the most sense in light of the fact that it's harder for people to lose the amount of sleep that would be necessary to produce the kind of harm that they're talking about than it would be for people to be affected by alcohol in a short amount of time. I think that that's pretty straightforward, and you explained that. You do have a statistic later on that talks about what the total number of deaths are based on research from 2 years, suggesting deaths linked to drowsy driving versus drunk driving, and one is more than 10 times greater than the other. So from a statistical point of view, your risk level certainly seems to be higher. The question I think that might be underlying all of this is whether or not driving while drowsy is equally as dangerous on an individual basis as opposed to a collective basis. I think that's probably would be the defense argument that the advocate would make in this particular situation. But you set it up in a different kind of comparison, and when you tried to define the word dangerous, I think that gives you legitimate criteria for making the argument that you're making. And I like the third point. I'm not sure that you would want to say that we are doing enough, but I do think you could say that we are acting, and sure, everybody wants to do more about every kind of potential danger that's out there. We don't want to dismiss this out of hand, but let's not panic about it. It's not as if it's been ignored. Here's proof that it hasn't been ignored, and then you can present your technological answers to that particular problem. I thought that was a pretty good answer to that issue as well, just maybe a little rhetorically problematic. Okay, thank you.